Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Vikings Online Sports Wrap edition here at 1500ESPN.com and KSTP.com. My name is Darren Doogie Wolfson. This is beat reporter Tom Pelissero. Tom, the Vikings are the best team in football for 3.5 quarters. What's your reaction when I say the Vikings have trailed for only 7 total minutes this year?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things involved in that. Obviously, they got a lead early on in San Diego when Percy Harvin returns a kickoff, but the last 2 games, the disparity between the first and the second half and losses to Tampa Bay and Detroit is as big as I've ever seen it.
Does this mean then that this is sort of who they are, or do you feel like, do they still have a chance? They're certainly not a playoff team. I think we both agree on that. But is there still a chance they can win 6, 7, maybe even 8 games, or is this more indicative of who they are and they'll end up with 4 or 5 wins?
Well, there's a chance because they've shown the past 2 games they can do it for 30 minutes and they can play pretty well. The thing is, right now, you have so many different issues on the offensive side of the ball. You have a quarterback who right now is inaccurate, and that's being impacted by an offensive line that's hemorrhaging pressure. He's starting to anticipate throws. He's starting to anticipate pressure. He's not stepping into his throws as well. The ball ends up sailing on him. They don't have a vertical threat. Teams are putting down. The Lions put a safety in the box on 52% of the snaps last week. So over half the time, they're playing a single safety coverage. They're down to stop the run, and you still can't hit anything over the top to Bernard Berrian, who doesn't have a catch. All those things fitting together, on top of the fact that it seems as though schematically, when teams start to go to more man coverage in the second half, they struggle. There's a lot of things working against that offense. The defense, honestly, overall, other than the fact that teams have figured out that they can really pick apart underneath that zone, particularly in the middle of the field when they play it in the second half, the defense has been okay.
Outside of the 7 minutes, that's all they've trailed for. They've only completed 1 pass for more than 24 yards. It was the screen pass to Toby Gerhart against the Buccaneers. Who's most responsible for that? Is it McNabb? Is it Bill Musgrave? Is it the offensive line not blocking well enough? Is it the inability of receivers to stretch the field?
I think that it all fits together because you right now have your guy who's supposed to be at the split end position, Bernard Berrian, who's a vertical speed receiver. He's lost that dominant trait. He's not as fast as he was. Yeah, we've seen him beat coverage twice, but that's twice in a 3-game stretch, and he's out there for 45, 50 snaps every single game. You have a quarterback who is not comfortable waiting and throwing the ball down the field. He doesn't seem as though he likes throwing the ball to Bernard Berrian. He's had a couple of opportunities, but if you have a receiver who isn't going to fight for 50-50 balls, you're probably worried about anything other than if he beats somebody on a go route and you throw it to him deep, you're probably a little bit skittish about throwing the ball to that guy. There's a bunch of things, and then obviously the protection. The fact that Phil Lodeholt had a god-awful game against Detroit. Charlie Johnson has been mediocre at best so far this season, and this past game you saw Dominican Sue absolutely dominate Anthony Herrera. So constantly what was happening was McNabb was either having to step back because the interior pressure and then the outside pressure could get there, or there was outside pressure making him step up into Sue. That leads, if you can't step into your throws, if you can't stride correctly, it's going to throw everything off.
You broke the news earlier this week about Max Starks, former Pittsburgh Steeler, coming in for a visit. Should the Vikings sign him, and will they sign him?
Well, I don't know entirely what the doctors found because he's coming off of a neck injury. He had weight and conditioning issues. Funny that they're now bringing in a left tackle with weight and conditioning issues 2 months after cutting a left tackle with weight and conditioning issues. You put that together. I think that they need to find some way to upgrade the offensive line. In the end, I don't know if there's anything that they can do this season to save this season. They're in an 0-3 hole. You're talking about needing to go at least 10-3 the rest of the way, maybe 11-2 the rest of the way to make the playoffs. So you're probably looking more toward the future. Max Starks is 29 years old. If he's a stopgap that can keep the quarterback upright, I think that you could potentially look at that. But, in terms of this actually upgrading something and making all the difference in the world, I don't know about that.
Yes or no, Christian Ponder should start?
Well, it depends how he looks in practice. I think that if he were doing enough in practice, the coaches felt comfortable with it, they certainly should consider it at this point because, honestly, with McNabb, McNabb is limited. He's always been limited. He's never been a really accurate pocket passer. We've seen some weaknesses in his game. He makes a couple of plays with his feet now and then, but you'd think that Christian Ponder potentially could make more happen if he got out onto the perimeter. Ponder has weaknesses too. He didn't look good as a pocket passer in the preseason. So you have 2 guys with very similar weaknesses. But again, if you're looking at 2011 as prelude to 2012, which they're going to have to do sooner than later, unless you're afraid that Christian Ponder is going to get the crap beat out of him and it's going to ruin him for the future, at some point down the line, there are diminishing returns to playing a 34-year-old quarterback who's on a 1-year contract.
Is it dumb of me to fascinate about Andrew Luck, Stanford quarterback, the best pro prospect at that position, to me, since John Elway? I mean, if they lose this game in Kansas City, they're 0-4. Can we start talking about the #1 overall pick in next April's draft?
No, because they're not that bad. I don't really believe this team's going to go 0-16 or 1-15 or 2-14. I think they do win 6 games, 6, 7, maybe even 8 games. It's going to be tough to get to 8 at this point because you'd have to go 8-5 the rest of the way, but I don't think that they're nearly that bad. There are much worse teams. Talking to people around the league, nobody thinks that they're an awful team. They're just an average team. And if you look at right now, point differential, the difference between the first and the second halves of games, again, they're not awful all the time. In the second half of those games, yeah, they look like a team would be a candidate for the #1 pick. But in the first half, they look like a borderline playoff team.
I have a man crush on Brian Robinson. What about you?
He's been very good. Robinson and Jared Allen, and people have made a point of saying, well, the pass rush hasn't been there in the second half like it has in the first. Yeah, but a lot of that has to do with how offenses are adjusting. 3 games in a row, what we've seen is offenses going to basically their sort of like third and long offense, their third down stuff, where they're trying to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. With Detroit, even though they made some plays down the field, those were just 3-step drop, throw the ball up high in the air, let Calvin Johnson go down there and get it. The average release for Matthew Stafford in the second half of that game, in other words, the time from the time he takes the snap to when he throws the football.
You want to demonstrate?
No, I don't. No, that's very scary, but it was under 2.2 seconds. So you're talking about under 2.2 seconds, where most sacks come between 2.5 and 3 seconds. So he's perpetually getting the ball out before the rush can get there. That's how you can make a difference. Then when the Vikings go back and they play their soft coverage, it wasn't all cover 2. They were playing some cover 3. I think I saw some quarters at one point. They're mixing things up, but everything has that soft underbelly in the middle of the defense. Teams are picking that apart over and over again. That's something that they've got to clean up.
Tom will be at Arrowhead Stadium on Sunday. Check out his work at 1500ESPN.com. Thanks for watching, everyone.